Welcome to episode 25 of the Nintendo Stuff podcast.
Brought to you by Diet 7-Up.
No, it wasn't, Brandon. I would appreciate if you wouldn't, promote products.
Brought to you by this mechanical pencil.
That's also not true. That's, just completely false. Brandon.
Brought to you by our own will.
So I'm Logan Welliver, and we got Brandon Miracle over here as well.
That's me.
Just going off on who knows what. But we are here for episode 25 of Nintendo Stuff to talk to you about all the things that really aren't Diet 7-Up.
It'd be better if we did.
Probably not. Diet soda's not great for you as well.
Well, I drink it and you can't stop me.
I mean, you're very right. I cannot stop you, nor would I want to stop you. It's your right? So the first thing I want to talk about is we got to talk some numbers, right? The Nintendo Switch has passed 7 million units sold in Japan alone.
As compared to
what? Like how many have been sold in entirety?
Yeah.
Oh, that I'm not sure. I mean, the last numbers we got on that. That's a good question. Switch sales. You got me running all over the internet. I thought I was so prepared for this, and you're like, wait a minute.
I caught you right at the start.
Right.
Caught you.
Looks like to date, as of September 30th, there was 22.86 million shipped.
Okay.
As of September 30th.
That's a fair amount of what's available.
Right. And, I mean, this was in September, so we're 5 months out? No, 4 months. Regardless, there's been a whole quarter that has passed, right? Quarter 4
and the holiday season.
Yeah, and the I think the metric that floated around was like it sold over 11 million worldwide within the fourth quarter of 2018.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's just in that last 3 months of the year that it sold that much.
Never underestimate the power of Pokemon or Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah. It's why there's been a ton of things going around, ton of the president. There's another piece in here that we'll talk about as well.
Shintaro Furukawa.
Mm-hmm. He has been talking about reaching this 20 million goal in the fiscal year. Right. So for those of you who don't know, the fiscal year ends at the end of March. So it's offset by 3 months from the actual regular year. Regular. Something like
Wonderfundle.
That. Somebody get a compilation of me just fumbling over myself. But yeah, so I don't know when this metric was. That's the one thing I didn't actually look at. Man, now I'm missing so much. Let's see.
The 7 million metric? Which one?
Yeah, the 7 million metric. Is that of Japan? Did it just set that? Posted a month ago that the Switch passed 6 million in Japan. From this comment, this is all sourced from Reset Era.
You click on it and it takes you to a forum.
Yeah.
Which doesn't source the actual source. So who knows?
They're cited in the article the exact numbers. So these metrics from this, whoever started this, they must be sourcing some like Japanese
Publication.
Yeah. Otherwise,
Something.
you wouldn't get these numbers like this specific, right?
No, but that said, we were unable to locate the source.
Right.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
Where are we at? What is happening, Logan?
Yeah. So it says posted a month ago that the Switch passed 6 million. So within a month, there's just a million more Switch consoles out there in Japan, right? And I think, Shintaro Furukawa talks about, that the 20 million goal was not like a small task, right?
No, and he's not the only one who thought that.
Right. So, but the fact that they're still like, no, we can still hit that, so within a year time frame, move 20 million Switch units. I mean, these are pretty insane numbers for like a console, right? Not like they haven't seen like similar numbers before, especially with something like the PS4. I mean, the PS4 is still moving pretty quickly, right?
Right. It's just a little less common now. The PS4 already has met its success, while the Switch is currently obtaining that.
Right. And who knows how long this is going to last? Who knows how many revisions of the Switch we're going to get? Because, I mean, we've already gotten revisions for the Xbox One and for the PS4, And that's all included in that same pot,
Right. There's a lot of rumors about that happening this year. Personally, I'm not going to put any stock in that. I actually don't think it's going to happen.
I think it'll happen eventually, and I don't think it'll be as big of a revision as people were wanting it to be.
Yeah,
or we're expecting.
I think it's going to be small time, like the DS Lite to the DS,
or the Nintendo 3DS to the new Nintendo 3DS.
Well, see, that would actually be something worthwhile to me, because the new Nintendo 3DS, I think it had more processing power.
Yeah.
On top of lots of other new functionality, hence the name. I think it will be smaller than that, honestly. Actually, I guess I should further that. I think it will be a smaller Switch.
Oh, you think so?
I think they might go the mini route instead of the XL route, because they want to get the Switch in more hands, and currently, it's a $300 system, and they're using the Nintendo 3DS as kind of that baby's first game console.
Right.
And I think that they're going to make a version of the Switch to fulfill that role once the 3DS is finally on the way out.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I suspect will happen. It'll either be a Switch that you cannot plug into a TV, or it will be a minier Switch.
I should note that, some of this information I'm sourcing this from is from this Nintendo Everything article / translation. Looks like they did the translation themselves. So one of the things he was talking about was how the 3DS kind of fits into everything. They asked him outright, what are your plans for the 3DS? And he notes this, and quote, we're nearly 8 years into the 3DS's life cycle now, so the amount of gamers who have wanted to purchase it are already there. The 3DS has its advantages in being a simple and lightweight handheld, that is also quite inexpensive. We plan to continue our 3DS business moving forward, as we've already prepared it to exist alongside the Switch.
Yeah, I mean, that's about what I expected.
Right.
It's just how long can they keep that momentum going?
Right, that's the question. Whether this is a lot of talk to make sure that hey guys, don't worry about the 3DS. You can still buy a 3DS. Because if it's still a product they're selling, they want to be able to sell it, right? And I think they're going to probably be, sell it for as long as they can. where it's still profitable, where it's still something that makes sense for them to continue supporting. But yeah, really the question is, like, at what point do they stop producing it, and stop supporting it?
It just depends on how lucrative it is.
Right.
It's like Luigi's Mansion on 3DS, which came out, I want to say, last October, has performed at 0.40 million sales, so less than 500,000.
Right.
Which I can't imagine they're proud of.
Right. So
because that is not a good number for one, a game with Luigi's face on it, and two, a 3DS game.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe that's the perception, right? For the longest time, it's like, man, the 3DS is getting old. They're like, oh, we're still going to support it, but like it's pretty old. The resolution, like, if they do a new 3DS at some point, like, at what point does that happen? Or is it just replaced by the potential for a smaller Switch? You know what I mean?
I think it would be best to go with a smaller Switch. That way they can finally condense all of their development resources to a singular system.
Mm-hmm.
But how inexpensive can they realistically get the Switch? I think that's going to be kind of the driving factor of whether or not the 3DS sticks around for as long as we think it will.
Right.
Because you get what, like a 2DS is like $79.99 or something like that?
Yeah.
And sometimes it goes on sale, and you'll see it for even less. That's a pretty good deal for a system with a wonderful library as the 3DS.
Right. How about
So
a Switch with a clamshell design?
I mean, that's possible. That could be the dockless Switch. Would it have a second screen, or would it be a single screen?
No,
system?
I mean, it could just be a single screen. I mean, we've done this before. Like, we had the Game Boy Advance SP, right? What if we had the
true.
Nintendo Switch SP?
As long as it still has detachable Joy-Cons, because I think that's something they really can't get away from with the way the system's designed.
Right.
But that, at the very least, I think would make for a good alternative. I don't know that it entirely makes sense for the Switch to be a clamshell design. It depends on how small it gets.
Well, and then my thing is, like, how small can you make the Switch, right? Where the actual, like, okay, detachable Joy-Cons on and off, like, are still going to make sense. You know what I mean?
They don't want to have to make another revision for the Joy-Cons that fits an exclusive Switch. So whatever they do, like, if it doesn't fit the current set of Joy-Cons, that's going to be bad.
Right.
So it's
well,
going to
then
have to be
how do they make
at
it
least
smaller?
that
That's the
large.
question, right?
Right. You can make the screen real estate a little bit smaller. I guess if they do a clamshell design, if they went, it's almost, I'm thinking like if you held the Switch vertically and made the screen smaller, you could do that, and you could have it to where the Joy-Cons could slot on the sides or on the underside.
Mm-hmm.
So you could hold it like a Game Boy, or you could hold it like a DS.
Yeah, my thing with, like, maybe like a clamshell design is the fact that you would be able to take the screen out of, the way between the Joy-Cons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, think of it like the Joy-Con grip, right? It's a lot closer. Now, what if there was an attachment of sorts, right? And then it just folded over on top of itself.
That could work. The only thing I'm thinking of now is, like, some games are not going to work so well because they'll have text that's going to be too small to read at that size.
Right.
So they would probably have to do some kind of update for a lot of their games, which I don't think is a huge problem. It just depends. Like Breath of the Wild, there's no way you're going to be able to see some of those icons.
Right.
At that small. And there's a lot to think about when it comes to this.
Yeah, I mean,
So maybe that might be a little too small.
Yeah.
I think if you shrunk the screen by maybe an inch, that would be like a safe amount. I don't know how much money they could save doing that, or how inexpensive the Switch could be.
Right.
But I would imagine that the Joy-Cons could still operate with like an inch of diagonal space removed from the Switch screen.
Yeah. And then the other question is like, the utility of making it smaller, right? Is the idea that it would just be that much more portable,
It's to hone in on that portable aspect.
Right.
Because I think if you make a smaller Switch, you remove the ability to put it onto a television. Because that knocks at least, the $90 dock price off of the SKU.
Right.
I would hope that just inherently a smaller Switch would be less expensive, but you never know. So, like, I would aim for a price point around $150, because I think anything $200 and above wouldn't be attractive to parents trying to buy a system for their kids.
Right.
Like, if they can hit that $150 price point, I think that's kind of their target range, because that's the price of a 2DS XL, isn't it? Or is it like $130?
I think it might be 130. 2DS XL. 2DS XL is like 130 to 150 depending on where you are buying it from, I guess. Maybe there's some sales going on.
Even a $200 SKU, that's $100 off the base Switch price. That's more attractive to parents with multiple children.
Right.
And that's really like the problem they have to solve, is how do they get the Switch into the hands of children who have, multiple siblings, they're all in the same house.
Oh, absolutely. And like, again, like
unless
you're talking
Pierre
about
Schneider
like,
and you have like 5 Switches.
Right. But that's not going to be everybody, especially with like,
of course.
I would say that the 3DS is definitely a more intimate experience,
Yeah,
like
for sure.
there's not that invitation to throw it up on a TV. It's just like that's the thing that you play and you watch, and nobody else really participates in that, So I
think that's a perfect like sidestep to the 3DS, a lateral movement. Gets you the updated HD software, but it's something that the kids can just kind of have for themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't expecting to take that turn in the conversation, but I think it was important to discuss, obviously.
Yeah, I guess this is just where we're at. Something else I should mention before we talk about a few games of note on the Switch and on the 3DS. Are the most played Switch games in Europe of 2019. Spoiler alert, Fortnite is number 1. But more surprisingly, number 2 is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild is the most played game in 2018 on Switch. A game that came out near the beginning of 2017.
Yeah, like that's
crazy.
That's insane. And it's not even a multiplayer game, right? It's just people are buying it and they're playing it. Also, this comes from like a Nintendo like Switch news, like on the console, right? This was released like in Europe, right? And I'm not sure like what the parameters are for most played. Is that most played in terms of number of hours? Is it how many times people booted it up? Is it factor
I would
in...
imagine they would measure hours because the Switch is already counting that inherently.
Right. So they probably just have all those metrics. So, I mean, it definitely helps that there's just like the sheer amount of people playing that game, and then the nature of it being like the biggest multiplayer game that there is right now.
I will mention that I'm pretty happy to see Xenoblade 2 sitting at number 10.
Yep. I mean, it's definitely up there. You can tell that like some of these games are probably up here because of their length or their replayability. You know what I mean? So the fact that Breath of the Wild is just, man, there's hundreds of hours of gameplay to get out of that. Fortnite is, again, online. It's really how much do you want to play? You know, how many hours a day can you dedicate? Splatoon 2 as well. I think it's, I mean, Super Mario Odyssey, just probably based on the sheer fact that it sold so many copies, you know, and it came out late.
Probably like a Christmas game for a lot of people too.
Right, and so they're playing that well into 2018.
Yeah.
FIFA and Minecraft are up there. Pokemon Let's Go. Elder Scrolls
5.
It's crazy. It's Skyrim.
Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
So there are some interesting games of note. Even with Smash Bros. Only being released like less than a month with left to go in 2018, it's at number 18.
Above Mario Party and Tennis Aces.
Oof. So I think this is just interesting to see how like people are spending their time, in particular in this is, you know, coming from Europe, right? So it's probably a big reason you see FIFA up here, is you get a lot of, you know, soccer fans.
I do like seeing a couple niche games here too, like in the case of Xenoblade, and Octopath Traveler's also on here.
Yes, yeah. Stardew Valley's at number 15.
Yeah, I mean, that was a little less surprising.
Well, it's less surprising, but also really surprising in the sense that it's the only, like, indie game, you know, that made it onto this list. I guess
right.
Paladins as well, but, you know.
Paladins. So, just something interesting of note. I think it's really cool to see. I'm a big numbers guy, right? So when I see 7 million sales, when I see the most played Switch games, love to see those numbers. Talking about new games.
Yeah. So we, as of this week, Travis Strikes Again. I wrote Travis Strikes Back in here. Travis Strikes Again, No More Heroes, has released on the Switch. And you know, I'll admit, I haven't been paying attention to this game all that closely. I know people love No More Heroes, but the fact that it's kind of a spin-off game of sorts, you know, made me a little less interested, even though I'm still like, okay.
At the same time, like, it's a canon entry in terms of plot. It also will dictate the fate of No More Heroes 3.
Right.
So if you are a No More Heroes fan, and if you aren't maybe not as interested in this game, maybe pick it up when it's a little bit less expensive and get that support in so you get the third game.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Suda wants to make it. It's just a matter of, is there enough interest for him to do it?
Can he justify it? So, reviews have been all right, which I don't think I'm surprised, because it kind of just seems like a smaller budget collection of little mini games of sorts. Nothing like terribly ambitious.
No. Which is a little unfortunate, given that this game was announced in the January Switch reveal years ago.
Yeah.
And it's finally here, and it's a little underwhelming from the sounds of things. And obviously, I can't comment on that personally because I haven't played it. At the same time, there was never enough interest there for me to play it, and that might speak on its own.
Yeah.
to the game. But if you play it and you like it, make sure you let people know so that the game gets the exposure it needs.
Yeah. So I think that might be the only game of note that I'm aware of that came out on the Switch. But there are a few 3DS games that have already been released, but are getting a price drop in the form of a Nintendo Select. 3 different games: Majora's Mask 3D, Super Mario Maker 3DS, and Star Fox 64 3D. So these are all Yeah. These are all dropping from a 40 to 20 or 19.99 if we're being technical about the price. This made me really think about like the life of the 3DS, because I feel like most of my opinions based on the 3DS are like, how much am I using it personally, in my time? So the fact that they were like, hey, here's some cheaper games, like, I've never played through Star Fox 64. And I don't think I've ever played Star Fox 64 3D, and if I have, it's been quite some time, and I didn't beat it. So
It only takes an hour.
Yeah, it's got me thinking, right? That I'm like, maybe I pay
That
some
one
moolah.
in the bunch is more interesting because that game went out of print.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
So I mean, the fact that like, oh no, you're getting more at a cheaper price.
Yeah, so like they're bringing the physical cartridge back so you can go out and buy it. And like you said, it will be less expensive.
Yeah. So I'm keeping my eye out for this, in particular because these launch February 4th, and if nobody else knows, my birthday's on February 6th. So, Mom, if you're listening to this, girl, she said she was gonna get me some Aldi gift cards. She goes like, buy some food, Logan. Buy stuff that's good for you. I was like, why would you give me a gift card? Just give me money. She goes, because then you can't spend it on anything else. I was like, that's not the point, Mom.
You're being forced.
She's like, buy food. Don't spend $20 on Star Fox 64 3D. So.
Yeah, this will be a great option for those of you still looking for some games on your 3DS that you never picked up. So go out and do that. That said, we're going to take a deeper dive into some rumors that have been coming around the last week or so. And Logan, why don't you go ahead and give us the lowdown on that?
Yeah, so I kind of just wanted to talk about the NES service as a whole as well.
Okay.
The NES Switch online service, because I think there's something that's been happening that I think the discussion has been mostly going under the radar. And that's particularly with the special versions of these NES games, right? So one of the big complaints that I heard, and I had myself with the NES service, is like, okay, we're getting these old games, right? And partially because they're old, they have certain artifacts, right? A certain like personalities that are just really reflective of the time. And what this can do is it can make these games quite difficult, right? Just because of how they had to construct the games. We've had discussions about how, they didn't have save states back in the day, right? There was only so much room on these chipsets. And so because of that, they designed games that were harder, that you had to play harder. But if you can get through
that you had to rent multiple times.
Exactly. So there was a lot of different reasons why they designed the games these ways. And now that it's like, okay, well, you just pay the $20 for the year and you get to play all these games, they maybe are realizing that people aren't playing these games as much as they thought they would, and maybe those reasons are because they were too hard. And so what they're doing with these special versions of these games is they are adding accessibility to the NES library, which I think adds a lot of like worth to the service itself. Like, how do we enable players to get into these games, And so they added 2 of these special versions this past week alongside a bunch of like other games. It's amazing. Like, we didn't just get like, I don't know when we got these necessarily, like the original ones, but they just keep throwing stuff out there. And this library is kind of filling out. And I think it'll be amazing, like, once we get halfway through this year, like, this is going to be quite the impressive selection of NES games. And then the added benefit of having these special versions, is going to enable people and encourage people to have these experiences. And I started thinking about this really hard. A plug for our Discord, right? I was having a discussion within our Discord, and I can't remember who. I think it might have been Nintendo Snow, and he was talking about.
I think it was
Castlevania.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Snow.
he was expressing his love for Castlevania, and I thought that was really interesting. And I asked him if he had beat it, and he said, "Well, I beat it with save states." Okay, so sometimes when I'm playing these games, I'm like, okay, guys, they're save states. Those are there to help you, okay? They're there to be a crutch. And I don't think we should be scared of those crutches, right? Because if it weren't for those crutches, chances are a lot of people would have never had that experience in the first place. They never would have finished these games, right? But now, because of these special versions, okay, Legend of Zelda, you have 6 hearts instead of 3. You start off with a crud ton of, like, rupees and a few different items that are going to assist you and make it easier for you to get into the game and then learn how the game functions. And then at a later point, Nintendo Snow was like, yeah, I got the cartridge. Okay, I'm going to go play it. And he played it and he beat it without having save states, right? And that's part of the beauty of these games is they don't take very long, so you can play through them multiple times, right? But with how many games there are, maybe you don't have time to really just invest in that. Okay, so play and learn the game, and then you can play through it again, on normal. But I think this is super important. So right now there are 6 of them, right? So we have Legend of Zelda Special, we have Gradius Special, which is a shooter. What do you call those that genre of games?
Shmup.
It's just shmup. That's what I thought. Metroid SP, Dr. Mario Special, Ghost and Goblin Special, and Ninja Gaiden Special. And it is clear to me that these are not going to be the only special NES titles. This is definitely a trend. I wouldn't even be surprised if there ends up being a special version of every single NES game on this list, depending on just like the difficulty and accessibility. But there is something else to note with the NES service, and is that there is good evidence that it will not be exclusively an NES service for long.
Right.
Coming from a bunch of data miners. So here's a quote from Nintendo Life, citing a tweet. This is where they're sourcing it from. Just a few days ago, data mining efforts uncovered a total of 22 SNES games listed in the NES Online app's code. And further digging also discovered the possibility of new emulator types being added to the service at a future date. Now,
3 total, I think.
Come again?
3 more total. 3 more emulators.
Yeah. Now, after yesterday's update and even more data mining efforts, it has been claimed that SNES games are not only still perfectly intact, but have also been updated to include full descriptions in various languages.
I think it's pretty clear that Super Nintendo is on the way and that it's not that far off.
Yeah. I think they might... I think maybe this was probably part of their plan the whole time, right? It's like really stretch out the release of things and drip feed things.
When they first announced that they were even going to do this service at all, like SNES games were already on that list.
Right.
So obviously, like, this was in the cards. It's just, for whatever reason, they staggered their release.
Right. Which I think is honestly pretty good, because they're probably trying to do... I mean, they're definitely taking a more conservative approach to the rollout. And I think that's because they want to gauge, like, okay, if we put this out and this is how much we offer for $20, right? Like, this seems like a really safe bet. Let's see how many people we can get. And then as we start to build out, like, and add incentive, to keep adding incentive for more people to hop on, right?
Yeah.
For more people to say, like, $20 a year for whatever I'm getting, and then that just builds up. So you get the base people. You get the people who are like, yeah, no problem. Like, I'm getting it for the online. I'm also going to get these games as well, and that's pretty cool. I'm not going to complain too much about that. And then over time, all of a sudden, like, you have this massive library, and I think that's really convincing. And then also the fact that it works in a way where you have to download the games. I mean, it's similar to what Xbox is doing with their Game Pass. They recently added the ability on PlayStation Now to download titles instead of just streaming them. So I mean, that's how I see this going, right? I just see it being filled with older Nintendo games, and then eventually Nintendo, maybe, I don't know how many years down the road, that's just going to switch over, or in addition to being able to download these titles, be able to just stream them straight up. Obviously for NES games, that's not really a big deal considering they take up so little space. But definitely down the line, that's what I see happening.
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty safe bet as far as the future of Nintendo's digital content offerings go for their legacy titles.
Yeah.
Thinking about this a little bit further, I was thinking, like, they launched their Switch Online service back in September. Obviously, we only had NES games at the time, and they've only been adding between 2 and 4 NES games a month since then. But if this gets announced in the next Nintendo Direct, and the 22 games that have been listed already, or at least the majority of them, are the launch lineup, and say that comes out at the beginning of February, that's honestly pretty good. Like, we started with NES, and within 5 or 6 months, we have an entire new library of legacy titles available through the service.
Also, something that's also pretty telling is the fact that, I mean, I think they might have just about sold through, like, the SNES Classic, right? Like, we're getting to
they're not making any more.
Right. So, like, if you don't get one soon, obviously they still, like, have them. It just depends on where you go. But
and these games are running on the same emulator that was built for those, from what I understand.
Yeah, that would make sense, right? I don't know why you would do extra work. So
I think that lends further credence to that being true.
Yeah. So I mean, they're probably selling through the last of the stock, and they're like, well, people are still going to want to play, SNES games. And that's what we're going to see happen.
But do those come as a singular app? How does that all pan out?
Yeah, so that's the question, right? And I don't think, I mean, definitely it could come like a multitude of ways. I'm inclined. I mean,
all this data was found in the NES Online app.
Right. Just so my question is like, okay, is that branding going to change? Is it going to be the same app? It's just going to be, include NES and SNES, entertainment system. Or maybe it's still called the Nintendo Entertainment System, but it's less of a reference. It's more of just a reference to the actual console itself.
The Nintendo Entertainment app.
Yeah. So.
Or you could just call it the Nintendo Switch or Nintendo Classics app or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, what is the official title of it right now?
I don't know. It's like Nintendo Entertainment System and then Nintendo Switch Online. Like, that's how it, like, appears, right?
Crazy name.
Yeah,
you're right. It's Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo Switch Online.
Yeah. So maybe they'll just throw the SNES branding in there. If
Nintendo
not, I
Classics,
always thought
Nintendo
it would
Switch
be
Online.
cool if they like had like a visual update, right? Because eventually I feel like this is a service that like eventually it's gonna look different once they find a better way of constructing it. You know, kind of like Netflix. Netflix has had multiple UI design changes.
It's already pretty similar to Netflix in that regard.
Right. But that doesn't mean that there isn't potential for the design to actually change, right? So I was thinking like having some visual when it even opens up that it makes you feel like, okay, you're turning on a tube TV and you're putting that
Pudding.
cartridge in, you know? Just having a little bit of charm to make the experience that much better or something like that.
See the classic 8-bit Nintendo logo. You
Right.
hear
And then
little
that would have been
Nintendo
my
cone
argument.
sound.
Like, okay, have two separate apps. Like, okay, here's the NES app, and then here's the SNES app. Because they're different consoles, right? Though it might get convoluted, and I anticipate that they'll just probably all throw it into one app, you know?
Yeah, I think it'll all be on one app, and then you switch between the various libraries of games by hitting, like, L and R.
Yeah.
And it just goes, whoosh, and it's the next set of games.
Right.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. I don't think there's a reason to separate them between separate apps, because that just gets complicated.
Right, and then it's inconvenient, right? They're going to focus on,
Yeah.
like, convenience in terms of, like, okay, all these games are in the same place. It's all the same service.
That said, like, once we get, assuming the next emulator, because there's 2 more on there, I guess, or 3 more on there that we don't know about, or I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 more, but if N64 and GameCube are on the way, just not even thinking about like Game Boy or other platforms, once we get to GameCube, I don't think they can even do the service the way they are right now, because those games are going to be a gig or more just individually.
Right.
So that it, like, you can't have them all loaded onto a singular app, because that app would have to be like 40 gigs in size.
Right, unless they were to rapidly expand, you know, the service and then the storage on the Switches, but like that's not going to happen. I imagine if we get to that point, like you'll be able to choose to download select titles.
That's what I was about to say. Like that, all of them will be on the list, but if you hit A and select it, you'll be asked if you want to download it, and that'll be part of your current like gameplay or your game shelf.
Right. So
this
you
is
have
what I'm renting right now.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a myriad of ways they could do this. I think they will at some point. I could see us getting up to GameCube games. But again, like the possibility still exists that some of those are maybe like Game Boy or Game Boy Advanced games.
I would hope there would just be an all-encompassing Game Boy app for all of the various iterations of Game Boy.
Yeah. So that
at the very least, package Game Boy and Game Boy Color together.
Yeah. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about in terms of all the strictly Nintendo stuff. We do have a few other like Switch releases, third-party stuff that I thought was a note. This stuff is pretty light. First, talking about the Celeste DLC that they have announced that won't come on the anniversary of the game, but it will be free. So they are adding content for all you people who are playing Celeste, and that is really, really cool. There is the rumor of a tease of a Darksiders Switch port, which is interesting because like this series is kind of a mixed bag.
I don't like Darksiders.
Do you want to talk about that? I have to step away for just a second if you want to continue talking about this stuff.
Let me get a little bit deeper into the thing here. Yeah, Darksiders has never really done it for me, despite me being a Zelda fan. But basically, the way this worked out, this comes from Nintendo Soup. Basically, the Darksiders Twitter account was getting involved with some fans and kind of subtly dropping hints. One of these Twitter users says, a trip to the Nintendo Switch, perhaps, and Darksiders replied with, perhaps. THQ Nordic says, don't mind at Darksiders, they had a couple and don't make any sense right now. To which they replied, we did not start the apocalypse early, nor did we prematurely talk about any upcoming games, or an upcoming game. So yeah, it's not clear, but they're certainly teasing it. And then THQ Nordic, I don't know if they were coming in as damage control or how that was all planned out, but kind of cute. It'd be nice if it came to Nintendo Switch. Like I said, I'm personally not a fan, so it doesn't matter so much to me. But if you like Darksiders, I hope that this pans out for you and you end up getting it. I don't know if they're referring specifically to Darksiders 3. I am under the assumption that that's what they're talking about because I think the first two are already available on Switch. So yeah, that's a possibility. It could be coming to Switch. Honestly, if you make a game and you're not putting it on Switch these days, what are you doing? You're doing something wrong. It's an easy way to make money. Moving on from that, we have some release dates, some yet to be released video games. We had the Mortal Kombat 11 gameplay reveal live stream yesterday. To which I thought was pretty cool. It's incredibly violent. I saw a man rip another man's face off. If you're underage and you don't like gore, maybe don't watch this. If you're overage and you don't like gore, maybe don't watch this. That said, in regards to Nintendo Switch, I did hear, and I'm not entirely sure where to find this. Let me look it up while I talk about it. I heard that Mortal Kombat 11 will come out on Nintendo Switch like 2 weeks after other systems or something like that. Let me see if I can find a specific about that. Let's see. 23 hours ago, Mortal Kombat 11 will launch later on Nintendo Switch. I'm reading this off of PressStart.com. They reached out to Warner Brothers, and they said it would come out after the others, date to be decided. So, to be expected. Unfortunately, it happens a lot with Nintendo platforms, and it's no exception here. I think the gameplay trailer looked pretty cool. Honestly, for a game like this, like it's a fighter. I don't like playing fighters portably anyway. I would probably just end up buying this on my PS4. That's just me. But it's nice that it will be coming out on Nintendo Switch. If I didn't have a PS4, obviously this would be the way I'd play the game. And that could change based on what I hear my friends want to do. If my friends want to play it on Switch, then I would probably just buy it on Switch because then I could play it with them. It really just all depends on that. Another game coming to Switch, also coming from NintendoSoup.com, 8-bit Smash Brothers like real men use items. It's coming exclusively to Nintendo Switch. This game comes from Ultra Dolphin Revolution, and it is an 8-bit style Smash Brothers game. Here's how they describe it. Real men use items as a couch multiplayer party game with a strong emphasis on collecting power-ups. It has an art style similar to like Super Mario Bros. 2 on NES or Doki Doki Panic. And it looks like you pull flowers out of the ground and they're items. Or am I just making that up? I think I'm making it up. But there are some cool stages here. Like I see there's one with that's in space and you have ships and stuff flying at you. There's like a fireball item. This is definitely inspired by NES era games like Super Mario Brothers and The Legend of Zelda. But yeah, so that's cool that will be coming. It seems like there's no release date yet. Over on their Twitter account, they said more details will be revealed soon. So make sure to check that out. It looks kind of cool. In addition to that, the Angry Video Game Nerd 1 and 2 Deluxe are coming to consoles. But is it coming to Switch? That's the question.
So I'm glad I got back in time for this. This is interesting because it is not just AVGN 1 and 2. The first one is being remastered in the style of AVGN 2. So it's getting a visual
rebuilt
update.
In its engine.
Yes. Yeah. So they run on different engines. And it seems like of all the consoles, it is most likely to come to Switch. And I think that is informed I think it could be informed just by the fact that it's the Switch, and why would you not put this game on the Switch, right?
Didn't the first Angry Video Game Nerd game come out on Wii U?
I believe so.
Yeah, so I'd be surprised if it didn't come out on Switch.
So
yeah, it's on Wii U.
There are definitely some other tweets in this thread that kind of point to that. In response to their own tweet, Freak Zone Games talks about actively developing for consoles. We know what you all want. I'm not allowed to answer questions on which consoles yet, but I think people would be very happy.
Oh, yeah, well, that says about everything, I think.
Right, and then in response to another one, so a one of the replies was from Martin Tucker 55 on Twitter. As long as it is ... you guessed it, on Switch, I'll be happy. And they just they post a maybe GIF, which is a lot more entertaining if you visit the actual thread and see the GIF. But I think it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear that it'll be coming to Switch, even though they have not said for certain.
Yeah.
But I thought that was of note, in particular just because I think James Rolfe has been killing it with AVGN, and the fact that that show's still going after...
He had a pretty good year last year with AVGN. Lots of episodes.
Yeah, lots of episodes, and some really, really big ones with Macaulay Culkin as well. Yeah.
He did like 3 or 4 videos of Macaulay Culkin. I watched every single
one.
Yeah,
it's cool that they just have all these different formats, and they're like, okay, let's get one person over and just, cover all this stuff. Definitely a good time. I have not played those games, though I might end up purchasing this combination.
They're precision rage platformers, which is a perfect fit given the source material.
Right.
I love in the image there that they tweeted out, there's just a picture of Mr. Bucket in there, which is one of my favorite episodes of the AVGN.
Yeah.
or no, it's of Board James, I think. Which is his board game show.
Oh, yeah.
And they crossed over a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, and that brings us to the end of kind of the third-party stuff. It was kind of a slow week for Nintendo. We're still waiting on that Nintendo Direct that just refuses to happen.
Yeah, it's funny. Not a lot of this news came from Nintendo itself, right? I think the biggest...
Most of it didn't.
Yeah, the biggest thing I would argue this week, and that's why I kind of focused on it, was the possibility for these Snes games. And that came from people digging around in the app's code, So I
would say that hints to the possibility of a Direct coming soon, but of course there's a Direct coming soon. So
yeah,
kind of not
if
not that important.
Yeah, if not next week, then the next week, then the next week. But I feel like
wait until March.
I mean, Nintendo's been relatively quiet ever since Smash released.
They're just riding it out.
Yeah.
Riding the wave.
Drop a few little crumbs. They're like, oh, here's the Yoshi release date. Here's the Kirby's extra.
We're weeks away from Piranha Plant being a playable character?
Yeah.
In Smash Brothers. So either Sakurai is going to do his own thing for that, or we're going to see it in a Direct.
Right.
I would hope we'd get a Direct because I want to know what's coming out in the rest of the year.
I'm with you on that. I can't wait to see what this this year has in store. We don't really know a ton. I mean,
we honestly don't. As far as second half of the year is concerned, we really only know about Pokemon.
Oh yeah, and that's not anything official. That's just other than when they announce Let's Go, they're like, oh yeah, we have this other game in the works too. This isn't the only game.
And we won't even see that game until the spring, probably.
Right.
As is with every Pokemon.
I mean, as far out as we can see, it's only one big release during the spring that we really know about.
Is that Yoshi?
Well, in addition to Yoshi, we have Fire Emblem, right? But I imagine that we'll get... When was the Yoshi release date?
March 29th, I want to say.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely getting Yoshi before we get Fire Emblem.
For sure. So yeah, it's going to be interesting seeing the timeline for the rest of the year, and I think that's what everybody's so anxious about is like once they finally show us stuff, how much of the year are we really going to see?
Yeah.
Because like last year, our big January direct didn't come until March, um, and with that direct, they basically gave us the entire outline all the way through E3. And then with the addition of the announcement of Smash Brothers for later in the year.
Right.
So is that going to happen again? Are we going to get like the timeline to E3, and then are they going to tease the big E3 game? Is that what's happening?
I feel like that's most likely. What's gonna happen is we're gonna get that first half a year, maybe like a drop or two of some smaller things happening later in the year. But Nintendo's been always like experimenting with how they deliver their information.
Yeah.
So it's really like maybe part of it's informed and then part of it's a risk, and therefore we don't know exactly what's going to happen every time they're like information dump. Like what kind of timeline are we getting? It really varies, but I think Nintendo has been more conservative as of late. With just allowing like a few more exciting things to slip through the cracks every once in a while.
They haven't really announced anything big since Joker.
Yeah.
Back in December.
And that was in correlation with the fact that like, oh, game comes out tonight, guys. So just more Smash hype.
So we were already like down with Smash, so as cool of an announcement as it was, I don't think it was like earth-shattering.
No, definitely not. Certainly exciting though.
So, do you think we'll end up with a direct mini, or are we going to get like a full direct?
I feel like 2019 is a year that in January we're gonna get a meaty direct. We're not gonna get a mini. I think we definitely got a mini in 2018 because there was less. Right, like really, in terms of
it's the year of the ports.
Year of the ports, and then all the bigger games were at the year's end.
Very end of the year.
Like very end of the year. So when they did the mini stuff, they're like, okay, here's the first 6 months, and then they, then they were like, okay, we'll get to the bigger stuff later. But I think because there are some bigger things coming. I think 2019 is going to be a bigger year overall than 2018 was, and I mean even basing that on the fact that Smash Bros was a 2018 game, but hardly right. Most of the sales are going to be outside of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean they've really just set themselves up to have a really stellar half of their 2018 fiscal year and then just be like charging into the 2019 fiscal year.
Something else just kind of struck me. So like Piranha Plant is a like a early purchase bonus for Super Smash Brothers, and that promotion ends on the 31st of January.
Yep.
Would it not make sense for them to readdress that in a direct where they also show us more Piranha Plant and say when he's going to come out?
I think so. Yeah, make the sell more of the game, right? Get more people to buy it early on.
And also just as an alarm saying, hey, if you're about to do this, you want to do it.
Yeah, no, I think that would make sense, and I imagine that somebody's mentioned it, right? It's like, okay, if not for the right reasons, maybe like, oh, maybe we shouldn't do this because the less people who we can just sell it later on. But I guess they would want the idea is that it's supposed to be incentive for people to buy it early, right? And to keep buying and keep those sales numbers really strong for that base. And then I guess just sells more Switches, and that's just more revenue. And
just given that fact alone, that tells me that there's got to be something. Like it has to be next week, in my opinion. Like I wouldn't think they'd want to do that the week after because there wouldn't be enough days left, right? The 31st is a Thursday, which is traditionally a direct day. So if they did it on the 24th, That's a whole 7-day reminder.
Yeah, I mean, next week is our last like full week of January,
Right.
and then Thursday the 31st is the last, day
Last
of
day of the
January.
month.
So I think if it's gonna be in January, it makes sense if it was next week. I think that gives. I mean, we're already like almost a month and a half out from Smash Bros. Like it's time for them to give us a little bit more of a talk about what's happening.
Yeah, and I feel like they've got some big games to address. If they talk about anything, I feel like it's going to be Animal Crossing. I feel like that's the game that they need to tell us about now. Because if it's anything like with Smash Brothers when they announced it back last March, with that little teaser, well, we had that little teaser already, and now it's time to expand upon that and show us what the game's all about.
Yeah.
You don't announce Animal Crossing in September of 2018 and don't talk about it until summer of 2019.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
Well, I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? That Nintendo is in the place where the vast majority of the time when they talk about a game being released, like it's gonna come out within like a 6-month to a year window,
Right. And we're already on 4 months past the announcement of Animal Crossing.
So I mean, I think it would make sense for a summer release. They're like, okay, we're ready to get this out, and it's been years. Oh my god, like the wait for this announcement.
Was the Japanese release of Animal Crossing?
New
Leaf.
New Leaf. It was like 2012.
Yeah, 7 years.
Yeah.
Whew.
So it's getting to be that time. This is the longest window we've had between two entries.
It was that
in the
time
Animal Crossing.
2 years ago.
Yeah. No, I mean, when did? And then what do you call it?
The gap between City Folk and New Leaf was what? 4 years, maybe 5 max.
Well, and then even so, like Pocket Camp just had its 1-year anniversary.
Oh yeah, and that game was originally supposed to tie in with the next mainline entry.
Right. So they weren't going to release that game like so far ahead. So I mean, if you look at it, like they released this, mobile Animal Crossing game because they're like, okay, we're going to be announcing Switch Animal Crossing soon. And then they're like, oh, here's Switch Animal Crossing. Like we are so close to that game being released. And we just don't even know it yet.
And there was those rumors like earlier, I think it was towards the end of last year that were saying that Animal Crossing was a Q1 game.
That would be incredible to me.
Yeah. I don't think that's happening personally, but I still don't think it's any later than summer. But that tells me like if we have to hear about it soon. And I guess we're probably in agreement in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully that comes true next week and we get a direct. If not, maybe sometime in February. Otherwise, we're waiting until March like last time.
Yeah. Well, and then that begs the question, like, how tight is the release schedule going to be for 2019? Like, is there going to be a big game, like, every other month? Is there going to,
I just hope it's not I hope it's not stacked the way 2018 was, where everything was backloaded. And we were just, they filled the rest of the year out with ports of big Wii U games.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of Wii U games they can port.
But that's not the point. The point isn't to port every Wii U game, right?
Right, but if they do that, that means they've got nothing to fill out the first half of the year with.
Right, unless there's
nothing
just
coming
things
out in February.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even have to be like a massive game, Like Nintendo has released smaller games like Box Boy, on the 3DS. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's room to throw in a few of those smaller developed titles.
Throw a Dr. Luigi at me, or a Pushmo game, something.
Right. So
this game's releasing after today's Nintendo Direct.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, at the very least, we're getting a March game. I wouldn't be surprised if
it's almost just an April game.
Almost just an April game, yeah. And then, I mean, maybe
Epic Yarn comes out that same month.
Like earlier in the month, I believe, like March 8th or something like that.
Yeah. But that still leaves like the rest of January completely empty. All of February is just nothing. I mean, unless you count like Piranha Plant being added to Smash, which is cool for us, but it's still not a new game.
Right. And that's where I would have suggested like throwing in like a smaller, and it's not like it's unprecedented to like, oh, here's a new game, a really small one. It's available now on the eShop, you know, just dropping it out of nowhere. Just to give people a little bit of like, hey guys, there's still content. We're working hard. We're making something really compelling. Go spend your money.
And that's what made that. Remember that January Direct from 2013, I think it was? And all that kind of stuff was sprinkled all over that Direct. And that made it, I think, still the best Direct we've ever had.
Right.
They had Hyrule Warriors. They announced Dr. Luigi. There was the surprise reveal of Rosalina after like 5 months of no Smash information.
Right.
Yeah, and just a lot of like stuff we weren't expecting. Hyrule Warriors, I think, was a big thing for me because it came from another studio. It was a collaboration with Nintendo. It's just really cool.
Yeah, and let's talk about like that for just a second. The fact that like there might be studios working on projects that we have not heard of.
That's true.
Like you could go so deep. Like remember when when Mario and Rabbids got leaked, right? Like nobody was like, oh, like that game's already so far into development, and then they're like, here it is, guys, and we're like, what the heck? Where did this come from? Like, I wouldn't put it past Nintendo to be working with another third party to create another game, more collaborations, just to keep the pipeline going, you know?
Like we talked about last week, one of the games I expect to happen this year is a top-down Zelda game, and the studio I expect, or the publisher, would have been, or not the publisher, the company I expect to work on it would have been Capcom.
Right.
That's a great partnership for a brand new Zelda game that doesn't take away from the main Zelda team's development on whatever they're working on next.
And then, so, something, I ran into a post on YouTube from the infamous Josh Thomas, right? Josh likes to be upset about really weird things from time to time. And, I mean, as is his right, but he was talking and complaining, and he just recently did a video complaining about all the Wii U ports coming to Switch and how it's like, we're not getting, like, all these other games. And I'm like, I can see his issue, but my thing is like, okay, because they had all this content, they were like, okay, we can sprinkle a ton of this in 2018, right? New content, a ton of people haven't gotten the chance to play it because they never owned a Wii U. Who owned a Wii U? And, you know, so let's give all these other players the chance to play this. It fills it out enough, and it gives it that value because the such, you know, small Wii U player base. And then it gives them time to do other things and spend a little bit more time because it's not as urgent. We don't have to, the Switch has enough. Spend a little bit more time on your games, really refine them, do something ambitious.
In addition to that, it's better to release those kinds of, I don't want to call them lower releases, but for the sake of the conversation, we'll say that. It's better to do that when the Switch population is still low. You want to use these games to get the population higher, to get more people buying Nintendo Switch, so that way you can confirm that, hey, okay, it's okay to put all of our time, effort, and ambition in these big games because there's going to be people who will actually buy them.
Right, yeah. Building that player base is going to be much easier to sell some of these games, you know?
Yeah. So, like, with Wii U, they spent a ton of time in all of these games, like Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. It's really unfortunate, but that game didn't sell very well.
Yeah, not in the grand scheme
comparatively to the rest of the series.
Yeah.
So this just gives Nintendo an excuse to put more time into those games because they know that they'll at least make the return.
Yeah. And those games are going to be super profitable too, right? Because you don't have to put a ton of extra work into them. They do. They put some extra things in there. They put some extra characters, you know. But in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty light. and they don't have to dedicate as many resources to that. But man, they're going to get a return on it. I mean, look how many copies of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe have been sold. You know,
And
like,
it's still selling.
and then maybe even in the same breath, like Breath of the Wild, right? Like that wasn't being developed as a Switch game. Technically, you could put that in the same category as all these other games, other than the fact that they released at the same time.
Yeah.
But otherwise, like there's not much of a difference between like Breath of the Wild on Switch, which is a port, you know, as some of these other games. So I think it's important that, you know, all these games can be played on the Switch at any times. That again, that there's a huge portion of the player base, increasingly large portion of the player base that will not have had a chance to play these games long term if they weren't on the Switch. So
And the nice thing is that a lot of these games are selling better than they did on Wii U.
Exactly.
Overall.
Yeah. So I think these ports are a net positive for a myriad of reasons. And that's also one of the reasons, like, we're running low on ports, right? It's not like the Switch needs that many games right now. But
True. That doesn't mean that there aren't still games they could port.
no, that's certainly true. So maybe there's one or two they have in their back pocket. I'd love to see Wind Waker HD make its way over to the Switch.
Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE.
Yeah.
I would love the opportunity to play that game. That's just not on my Switch, or
Right.
not on my Wii U.
So, I mean, it's not, they still have more if they need them, and I don't think it's clear to me that they're wanting to port every game, right? I don't think that's the reality.
They're porting the tentpole games.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we still don't have 3D World. I'm not sure if we'll get that one, to be honest.
We already have Super Mario Odyssey. It already fills that void.
Yeah. I don't think you can port Star Fox Zero without basically dismantling that entire game.
Right.
Because the Wii U gamepad is essential to the gameplay. I see
Right.
people say all the time you can just change it to gyro controls, but you really can't. That's not how that game works. You need the
Right.
second screen. Maybe Paper Mario Color Splash, but again, that's a game that would require extensive work because the entire like battle system is on the gamepad.
Right. Also, I would rather just get a new Paper Mario.
Right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if they did port it, that Intelligent Systems would be the ones doing it.
I mean, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah, they can outsource.
And they're
a
busy
lot of
with
these.
Fire Emblem right now anyway.
Right.
Though I think they do have more than one team.
I was about to say they're big enough. Like Intelligent Systems, there's probably significant resources that go into that studio.
I 150% guarantee you they will make a Paper Mario game and that it will be a return to form and it will be on Switch.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that it's happening. Just based on recent trends with Switch games and their franchises going back to, you know, what people remember and why they were exciting in the first place.
Man, all you have to do is spend a few hours in like the Paper Mario community online. Like anybody talking about Paper Mario, and you'll see what are of all the Paper Mario games, of all the different things they've done in that series, what do we love the most? And it almost always goes back to Thousand Year Door and the original Paper Mario.
Yeah. I mean, I also do love Super Paper Mario, but for different reasons. Obviously.
Right. No, that's also a great game. It's just like it's very different than the first two entries.
If we get Paper Mario, I think that's a 2020 game. Like I think it'll be next year. Because that puts it in. That would technically be year 4 of the Switch, wouldn't it? Or
2020?
Like the beginning of year 4? No, it'd be year 3. And let's see, Paper Mario Color Splash came out in year 4 of the Wii U, and Sticker Star was a 2012 or 13 game. So that timeline, I think, works out, and it gives them actually kind of a deficit too. doesn't it? In terms of the release schedule. Sticker Star was 2012. Color Splash was 2016, I think.
Yeah. So if there's like a 4-year
2020
gap.
would be, a 4-year gap. That's actually right on target.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see it. I mean, man, I can't believe we got back to Paper Mario, but
We were talking about future Switch releases, and naturally that came
yeah.
up.
I mean, but just real quick before we really finish up, like, I mean, what do we know for 2019? Like, we know Yoshi. We know that there's Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn on the 3DS. I wouldn't be surprised if we got another Kirby game on the Switch.
Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn, I think, is the last 3DS game we know about.
Yes. In terms of Switch releases, we know that Animal Crossing is slated for 2019. Luigi's Mansion.
Yoshi, Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion.
Daemon X Machina is another game.
Daemon X Machina.
Fire Emblem. Is that's
already
5?
Yeah.
Pokemon.
Yep,
Pokemon.
We'll just
so
count
that's
that as
6.
one game. We know of the existence of Metroid Prime 4 and Pikmin 4, but we don't know when those games are
I could see Pikmin 4 coming out this year. Much less likely, at least I'm more unsure that a 2019 release of Metroid Prime 4 would be realistic, right? Because who knows how long that game has been in development? Because all we know is that when they announced it, they're like, it's in development. Okay, but for how long has it been in development? They're just telling us now, right?
That was 2017. That was over a year and a half ago that announcement happened, right?
I believe so.
2017, June. Yeah, it was the first E3 of Switch.
Yep. First E3 of Switch. So, I mean,
if we add those two games on, that brings us to 8.
Right.
And that's all first-party releases except for Daemon X Machina.
But that's an exclusive.
Right.
Well,
so you might as well just throw it on there. Bayonetta 3. I just thought about that.
Yeah, that could be a 2019 game. So, I mean, realistically, like, we have the potential to have a really full year. Potentially. And then that doesn't even include that there are other games that they just haven't told us about that maybe they're not going to tell us about until E3. You know,
there will be a game at E3 that's announced that will come out before the end of the year.
Yeah.
For sure. So, yeah, 2019 already looks just better than 2018 just because they've prepped us. It's a little strange knowing about this many games already. When does that ever happen?
Well, I mean, that being said, there are a few of these that aren't sure. There maybe could be delays.
3 of them, yeah.
Yeah.
So realistically, there's 6 games we know that are coming out this year.
Right.
Which is already better than 2018.
Yeah, and considering one of those games is Animal Crossing, I mean, let's be honest.
Did we even put Animal Crossing in the count?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So it's a promising year. I feel very, very confident as a Nintendo fan entering 2019.
Yeah, so do I. Like we said, hopefully that Direct comes next week, because if we were able to discuss this for 30 minutes straight, they have some explaining to do, because obviously we don't know about enough.
Right. So I think we're reaching a boiling point with this need for a Direct.
Yeah. But with all that said, if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at Babababs. You can follow Logan at LoggyDubs. You can follow us as a collective at Breakroom Arcade. If you want to continue this discussion, you can go into our Discord server. There's a link to that in the description where we talk about it. Pretty much anything we want. And we're in there a whole lot, so make sure to do that. Please like and subscribe on this video here on YouTube. If you're not part of the family yet, we'd love to have you. Plenty of room here at the Breakroom Arcade. And make sure to come back well, I guess it'd be next Friday, because we're not doing a breakdown next week. So next Friday, 7 p.m. Central Time, for the next Nintendo Stuff podcast. Hopefully we will have some Nintendo Direct stuff to talk about. If there is a Nintendo Direct next week, we will do a predictions discussion the night it's announced, as well as a post discussion the day it airs. And if we're available to do a live reaction, we'll do that as well. It's just a little less certain these days because none of the three of us are ever available during the daytime.
Yeah, it really just depends. And then my schedule is so volatile, like it changes just the nature of AV.
Right.
So
I'll be working on some videos this weekend that I hope to have out for you guys next week, as well as continuing the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time randomizer.
And
now
I
that my computer's all
will
back together.
have a video up next week. Get that out before. Hopefully, I can get that out before there's a
direct.
A direct.
Once a direct comes around, you know, we gotta tunnel vision that.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, plenty of stuff to look forward to. I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with us all the time. It's really a pleasure to do this show for you all. I mean, there are weeks where it's harder than others, I think. It's interesting though, because like once we start the conversation, it just gets going and we start having a good time. We went over half an hour when the show was supposed to end. Started talking about Nintendo in 2019, so I feel blessed to be able to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, we'll see you guys next Friday, 7 p.m. Central Time. My name is Brandon Miracle, joined by Logan Welliver.
Yeah.
Don't break your backs. Breaking the games, but for now, break time's over.
Make sure to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night.
Go watch Dragon Ball Super Broly.